Today's episode begins with a sentence I've heard, as a therapist, too many times. A sentence that, after certain cases, is hard to forget. Spoken by a tired nurse in an emergency room to an exhausted family, about a woman who had just made her second attempt. Those who announce don't actually do it. It's an old sentence. It's a false sentence. And it's a sentence that, year after year, costs lives. We talk today about a reality no one wants to face directly. What happens when a person in deep psychological suffering asks for help, and the system, the people around them, and sometimes even those who love them, fail to hear them in time? About signals that should have been heard, about myths that make us deaf, and, most importantly, about what each of us can do wherever we are when we recognize these signals in someone dear. And if you have someone, however far away, about whom you sense right now that something is no longer right, stay until the end. I'll call her Roxana. She is 42. She had been in a relationship for 12 years with a man she loved deeply. 12 years of shared life, shared friends, shared rhythms. Like many couples after more than a decade together, their bond felt settled, established, beyond the risk of brutal surprise. They had what most people, looking from outside, would call a stable life. A year ago, something began to shift. He grew distant. Not visibly absent, present in the house, but increasingly elsewhere in his attention. The conversations grew thinner. The small daily intimacies started to disappear. Roxana asked him, gently at first, then insistently, what was happening. The answers were evasive. "I'm just tired. I have a lot on my mind. Don't read into it." In February, after months of growing silence in his presence, Roxana asked him directly. She wanted the truth, whatever it was. He answered with a photograph. A photograph of him embracing another woman. Beneath the photograph, a single message. "Don't contact me anymore." This wasn't simply the end of a relationship. It was an execution. A public humiliation, delivered visually, without mediating words, without even the courtesy of a face-to-face conversation. And what happened inside Roxana, at that moment, has a clinical name. Not just heartbreak, not just devastation. Something deeper, more dangerous, that we'll come to understand together. To understand what happened inside Roxana, we need to look at a clinical theory formulated by psychologist Thomas Joyner, one of the most influential modern frameworks for understanding suicidal crisis. Joyner shows that, for such a crisis to become lethal, 3 components must appear simultaneously. The first, the sense of not belonging. The deep conviction that the bonds connecting you to the world have been severed. For Roxana, the rupture wasn't just the loss of a partner. It was the loss of the entire life she had organized around that partnership. The shared friends who would naturally align with him, the future she had imagined, the daily structure of a life that had felt permanent. The central tie that organized her social and emotional world had just been cut, brutally, in the form of a photograph. The second component, the conviction of being a burden. The belief that, without you, things would go better for those around you. It is one of the most deceptive convictions of suicidal crisis, because the person comes to believe it firmly, though it is completely false. Roxana, in the weeks following the betrayal, began saying to family, "You're tired of dealing with me. I'm troubling you for nothing. You'd be relieved if I just disappeared." Phrases that, to an untrained ear, sound like exhaustion or modesty. To a therapist, they are maximum alarm signals. The third component, the acquired capacity to cross the threshold. In clinical terms, having already taken steps toward that threshold. Previous attempts. Roxana, in March, had a first attempt. Few weeks later, a second. The family, her mother, her sister, a close friend, called emergency services each time. They asked for hospitalization. The official response was that she didn't seem aggressive. She was sent home. Here is the disaster. In the light of Joyner's theory, Roxana met, in March, all 3 criteria of acute lethal risk. Not belonging, verified, brutal recent rupture. Conviction of being a burden, verified, expressed repeatedly to family. Acquired capacity, verified, 2 documented attempts. Any psychiatrist with basic training should have recognized this picture and acted. To send her home with such a clinical presentation, with the observation that she doesn't seem aggressive, is not a medical decision. It is an omission. There is a popular belief, repeated like an old saying, that I've heard spoken by emergency room doctors, by police officers called to scenes, by neighbors, by friends, by family members. The belief that those who talk about ending their lives do so, just for attention, and those who actually act do so, in silence, unexpectedly. Research has contradicted this completely, without ambiguity, for decades. Studies repeated from Robbins's 1959 classic to recent syntheses show that between 50 and 75% of people who die by suicide had communicated, verbally or in writing, their intention to someone in the 6 months preceding the act. Direct communication. Repeated. Often ignored. The myth persists because acknowledging the truth would be unbearable for those left behind, and because a society that recognized its responsibility would have to change things. It's easier to believe, those who announce don't do it, than to accept that the mental health system is, in many places, barely functional. And people often announce in ways we confuse with something else. The words are there. Only the ears aren't trained to recognize them. Let me name the signals briefly because if you remember even 3 of them, this episode will have done its work. First, change in how they speak about the future. They no longer make long-term plans. They say, after this passes, things will be calmer, speaking about events they will not be part of. Second, sudden calm after a long period of turmoil. This is one of the most counterintuitive signals, and therefore the most missed. The family breathes relief. At last it's past. But that calm, in someone who has announced previous attempts, can mean an internal decision has been made. Third, putting affairs in order beyond ordinary organization, giving away cherished things, paying off old debts. Fourth, expressing the conviction of being a burden. You'd be better off without me. I no longer deserve care. Not modesty, not passing fatigue. The direct indicator of Joiner's second component. Fifth, and most important, direct communication even in covered form. I don't have the strength to go on. If tomorrow I weren't here, it would be more peace for everyone. These are not poetic metaphors. They are announcements. If you recognize these signals in someone you love, what do you do? Not tomorrow. The first answer isn't about phone numbers or hospitals. It's about how you stand with that person. The how matters as much as the what. The first principle, listen without trying to fix. The instinct when someone we love is in deep pain, is to offer solutions, perspective, reassurance. Things will get better. You have so much to live for. Think of all the people who love you. These statements, however well-meaning, often land as dismissal. The person in crisis hears them as proof that they cannot be understood, that their pain is being argued away. Instead, sit with the pain. Acknowledge it. What you're going through sounds unbearable. I'm so sorry it hurts this much. The acknowledgement is more therapeutic than the reassurance. The second principle, ask directly. This is one of the most counterintuitive findings in suicidology, and one of the most important. Many people fear that asking directly about suicidal thoughts will plant the idea, or make things worse. Decades of research show the opposite. Asking directly, calmly, with care reduces risk. It signals that the topic is speakable. It opens a door. Are you having thoughts of ending your life? Said with warmth, not with panic, is one of the most useful sentences in this entire field. Don't whisper around it. Name it. The third principle, validate the emotion without validating the act. This is a delicate balance, and it's where many caregivers lose their footing. You can fully acknowledge that the pain is real, that the situation is devastating, that what happened was a betrayal, without agreeing that ending things is the right response. What he did was terrible. The pain you're feeling makes complete sense. And I need you to stay. We'll find a way through this together. Two things side by side. The validation and the firm anchor. The fourth principle. Don't argue against the convictions of the crisis. Telling someone in crisis you're not a burden when they've just said they are. The argument lands as not being understood. Better to say, I hear you feel like a burden right now. I want you to know that's not how I experience having you in my life. Acknowledge the experience first, then offer the alternative truth side by side. Don't try to win the argument. Try to keep the door open. The fifth principle: stay close even when it's hard. People in deep crisis often push others away, sometimes brutally. The push is part of the crisis. Don't take it as your cue to leave. Stay reachable. Stay in regular contact, even if your messages aren't always answered. Sometimes the most therapeutic act is the simple fact of being there week after week, when the crisis tells the person they are alone. Beyond the listening, there are practical steps a family can take, and they apply regardless of which country you live in or which medical system you navigate. First, restrict access to dangerous means. In a crisis, the time between thought and action is sometimes very short. The most powerful intervention, supported by decades of research, is to make the means difficult to reach. This means securing dangerous items in the home, asking a doctor to limit prescription quantities, working with a person to identify and remove their planned method. This is not paranoia. It is one of the most effective single interventions known in suicide prevention. Second, safety planning. Sit with the person calmly and create a written plan together. What are the warning signs that the crisis is escalating? What are the calming activities that have helped before? Who can be called and in what order? Where can they go physically that is safe? This plan, written and accessible, can change outcomes. There are well-established formats. The Stanley Brown Safety Planning Intervention is the most widely validated, and any clinician can guide you through it. Third, professional help. This means a psychiatrist for medication assessment, a therapist for ongoing support, and crisis services when the immediate moment requires intervention. Don't wait for the perfect therapist. Don't wait for the ideal moment. Start with what's available today in your area. The right fit can be found in time. The immediate access cannot be postponed. Fourth, the written refusal. If you go with a person to an emergency department and you are refused admission despite clear risk factors, ask for the refusal in writing, signed by the doctor on duty. Request it firmly, calmly, without argument. The written request changes decisions in nearly every country with a structured medical system, because a doctor who must take responsibility in writing thinks twice. Say it exactly so. Please give me the refusal of admission in writing, signed and dated. In most jurisdictions, this is your right, guaranteed by patient law. Fifth, persistence. Mental health systems in nearly every country are underfunded, overwhelmed and slow. If you are refused once, refuse to accept it as final. Call again. Ask for a supervisor. Seek a second opinion. Go to a different facility if necessary. Families who persist obtain in time response. Families who accept the first refusal often do not. And sixth, care for yourself. Being the support person for someone in suicidal crisis is exhausting in ways that are hard to describe to anyone who hasn't done it. You need your own support, your own therapist, your own trusted listeners, your own breaks. You cannot carry this alone, and you don't have to. The strongest caregivers are the ones who admit they need carrying too. For you, the one who, listening to this episode, recognized in Roxana something of what you yourself feel now. 3 very simple, very direct things, worth more than everything I've said until here. First, what you feel now, however deep, is a state. It isn't your truth. It isn't your identity. It is a state of your brain under more pressure than it can carry alone. States change, especially when they receive appropriate help. The conviction that things cannot change is, itself, part of the crisis, not the truth the crisis shows you. Second, the feeling that you are a burden to those who love you is, in the overwhelming majority of clinical cases, false. Those who love you don't see you as a burden. They see you as someone who suffers. And for them, the pain of having you suffering beside them is infinitely smaller than the pain of losing you. I don't say this to soothe you cheaply. I say it as a clinical fact verified in thousands of interviews with families who lost someone. All without exception would have preferred anything instead of losing you. Third, there are people trained to listen in every country in the world. crisis lines, listening services, mental health professionals. They exist, they are reachable, and many of them are free. The exact names and numbers for the main English-speaking regions are written in the description below this video, together with a link to an international directory that lists verified services in over 130 countries. Wherever you are in the world, a warm voice is waiting. Look up the helpline for your area, or use the resources in the description as a starting point. And now, the thought I want to leave with you. Roxana, the one we spoke about, is a construction. The name, the details, are fictional. But the combination of factors I described happens, just like this, in thousands of families around the world right now. The stakes of this episode were to name them, to put them into words for you. The one listening who may have someone dear in such a moment, or who may be in such a moment yourself. Severe psychological suffering is not invisible. Has signals, has words, has gestures, has moments, and those signals can be recognized, if ears are trained to hear them. Once recognized, there are clear, possible, accessible steps families can take anywhere in the world. We do not live in a world where medical systems function perfectly. Cases where someone who asked for help was not heard exist. But between the failure of a system and the saving of a beloved person, there is an enormous space. And in that space, an informed family, attentive, persistent, present, can do more than they think. If this episode gave you something, even one tool, even one phrase to hold on to, pass it on. To someone you love. To someone who knows someone in difficulty. To someone who works with vulnerable people. Clear information in this field saves lives. Not rhetorically, statistically. And if you yourself recognize something, please, one more time, reach out. The numbers are in the description below this video. A warm voice is waiting. See you in the next episode.